your more angry members are people who became frustrated and stuff like that. And that started happening as well. And that, of course, alienated another layer of people from the trade union bureaucracy and created this kind of a division within the unions as well. So with this fading away, right, of this activist layer in the trade union movement, skills and knowledge didn't get passed on. So if you think it was 1987, today is 2010, it's 23 years. Now 23 years is a long, long period to have no real serious industrial struggle going on. And all the things that people learn, all the things that shop stewards learn, all the things that people learn through struggle in their jobs and fighting, that knowledge is only really passed on during periods of struggle. It can be verbally passed on to people, and we've heard very good talks by people talking about strikes and how they won, etc. And verbal history is important, but without the actual experience of it, it's very hard to imagine it just through the words of another individual. And it's also very hard to hone your skills in terms of getting the experience yourself. So all that skill base, if you like, all that knowledge retreated to a certain extent as well. So then we went into the current period. So everything was rosy in the garden while the Celtic Tiger was roaring, in a sense, because wages increased to a certain extent. There was a certain amount of money around, there were a lot of opportunities around, and we can argue about whether every boat was lifted, etc. We know for a fact that every boat wasn't, but in general, I remember working in Knocknaheeny in the 80s, in the early to mid 80s, and used to do a lot of work up there with a previous organisation I was involved in. But what was remarkable at that time was that we used to do a lot of work there at night time, and the amount of young men hanging around the streets drinking and stuff. And I'd say within 5 to 10 years of that period, as the economy started to pick up, you would go through Knocknaheeny at 2 o'clock in the morning, there wouldn't be a soul on the streets because everyone was getting up for work the next morning. So it did have that effect. It had a social effect. People felt an investment in the society because they had work, etc. You go to bed, you get up to work, and people started buying things, motor cars, etc. People started building houses and buying houses. People started having a certain amount of material wealth. So I think that material conditions in general improved, but people's relationship to the power structure didn't change, except in the sense that they probably people didn't worry as much about what the state or what the government were doing because they had a few bob in their pocket. So you come to this current period and you come to the crash of the Celtic Tiger and you come to the international monetary situation, and suddenly the last partnership agreement that was signed is reneged on by the employers and by the government. Why? Well, the economic situation has changed, and therefore they want to cut wages, they want to cut the number of workers in the country, and they want to cut services in government, and they want the working class to pay for them, essentially. So all those years of partnership, where the government and union sat down together, where the trade union leadership went native to a certain extent, and were as one with the government, suddenly came to naught overnight when the pressure came on economically. And the result is that we are faced with this huge battle for our class, where people are losing their work, losing their homes, losing huge chunks of their money, are under serious pressure, losing services in hospitals and schools, etc. And the most important vehicle we have for defending ourselves against these cuts, the trade union movement, is in serious trouble, is in serious decline. And I printed off statistics off the computer earlier, and it's about trade union membership. And in 1987, when the first partnership agreement was signed in Ireland, the membership of Irish trade unions was at 56%. That's 56% of the workforce here were a member of trade union, which is a hefty figure by international standards. In the public sector, it was like 85% membership. That hasn't changed much, by the way. It's around that still in the public sector. And in 2007, we were down to 32%. Now, if you take that the public sector is almost 20% of the workforce, that's a quite substantial drop. And where the drop in trade union membership came was in the private sector. And there's a statistical breakdown of the various sectors in the economy over trade union membership. Not surprisingly, the public sector is one of the highest. It's over 80%. But in the food and accommodation sector of the economy now, trade union membership is down at 6%. And what's interesting is that there's been a little bit of growth in trade union membership in terms of the overall workforce in the last year. So you wonder why is that people started joining trade unions in large numbers again. The actual fact what's happening is that the most vulnerable sectors of the economy are the least unionised, and they're the first people to get laid off. In other words, in the retail sector, in the food sector, in the hotel sector, they're the people who are losing their jobs fastest, the most precarious employments, if you like, and they're the least likely to be unionised. So that's skewed the figures and get this abnormal kind of figure. But the fact is that trade union organised workplaces are less likely to lose jobs. Not that they won't lose jobs, but they're less likely. And obviously, allied to all this has been this huge decline in wages right across the private sector, and now in the public sector too. So the agenda that we're facing from the state and from the capitalist class is this huge desire to force wages down, to reduce their cost base. And the idea of reducing cost base, obviously, increase profits. I got an email from John Jeffries the other day. It's a very entertaining letter. You might have seen it in the Echo that was published. Lord Colthurst, who owns Blarney Castle, was bemoaning the fact that he only had 180 customers on a certain day on last month, and that the solution was to cut the minimum wage, because he pays his workers the minimum wage. And John was pointing out, how will this increase the number of people coming through your gate, he's saying. But he was also saying, this man is a multi-millionaire, and he was asking for his workers who were paid the minimum wage to take a wage cut so he could increase the profitability of his business. There was what's our response to that? What's our response? Well, I mean, as lefty, it's easy enough to say your response should be we fight back. We fight back against this. We organise and we fight back against it. The problem is, of course, is that the trade union movement has been so weakened that it's very difficult to mount this fight back. The key sector that has the most powerful unions at the moment is the public sector, and very shortly most public sector workers will be voting on an agreement that the full-time bureaucracy has signed recently with the government, and are attempting now to soften or repudiate it. We might have come across that, but that struggle is probably the key struggle, in the sense that it offers the hope that a whole section of workers, probably the most organised, the most consistently organised section of the Irish working class, would vote to reject that agreement, and then that might give a bit of a lead or give a bit of hope to other people within our class that there's the possibility of fighting back against it. Now, being stick being held over us at the moment is that basically there's no other way but these cutbacks, and if we don't do these cutbacks, we can't participate in the International Capitalist Club, and we can't be successful in terms of re-energising our economy and bringing us back to the great heights that we were at before. There's a truth in that, and let's be quite frank about that. There's a truth in that. If we want to participate in the international capitalist economy, if we want to participate in the way we did before, it's going to have to come through costs being reduced. And their thing is the same as wages. They're the costs that are being reduced, or welfare cuts, or cutbacks in health and education, stuff like that. Now, of course, there is another approach that can be taken, and as an anarchist and a worker, I would say that I'm kind of, quite frankly, a bit sick of the capitalist system. I don't think it really works. I think that it's been an abject failure, as a matter of fact. I think it's time to try something else. And I was reading Vincent Brown, a very good article in the Irish Times the other day. He listed the wages of all the top earners in Irish society, and they ranged from Tony O'Reilly, who got 175 million euros wages off Irishmen this year. So people on 3 and 4 million, down to people who are on a lowly 700,000 and that. And the question we have to ask ourselves, right, and the question he put it very well. If we were all stranded on a desert island in the morning, and we all just arrived on a desert island, would we decide that, look, what we're going to do is, the 5 of you are going to be in charge, right, and you're going to get 90% of the resources, and the rest of us are going to work for you for programs for the rest of our lives. You wouldn't choose it. So why do we run our society this way? And if anything, the most important role for the left at the moment is to get stuck into your trade union, and if you're in the public sector, you probably have the hardest role, but the most important role, to fight to retake the union from the bureaucracy, to fight for democracy in the trade union movement. The second most important role is to get the ideas out there that there's an alternative to capitalism, that we don't have to live under this crazy economic system, that we can create something better, and that there's plenty of examples in history, but also in our own history, about people cooperating and working together for the common good. And these are the two messages that we need to get out there, and we need to all participate in that struggle. But I would urge anyone here who isn't in the trade union, if you're an employee, if you have a boss, then you have to be in a union with your fellow workers to defend yourselves. And that's the only way that we achieve anything, is to get organised. Is the only way we can achieve anything. Thank you very much.